You watch those nature documentaries on the cable?
Yeah.
You see the one about lions?
Yeah.
Get this lion. He's the king of the jungle. Huge mane out there. He's laying down under a tree in the middle of Africa. He's so big. He's so hot. He doesn't want to move. Now, the little lion cubs, they start messing with him. Biting his tail, biting his ears. He doesn't do anything. The lioness, she starts messing with him, coming over, making trouble. Still, nothing. Now, the other animals, they notice this, and they start to move in. The jackals, hyenas, they're barking at him, laughing at him. They nip his toes and eat the food that's in his domain. They do this, and they get closer and closer and bolder, till one day, that lion gets up and tears the shit out of everybody, runs like the wind, eats everything in his path. Because every once in a while, the lion has to show the jackals who he is. It's too late to be scared. It's time to kill. I'm going to the other room. You come out when you're ready. Don't beat him. Kick his ass.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Maximus Heart video podcast. I am John Fontaine here from Maximus Heart, and this is the third installment in a very unplanned series with my friend, a mentor to me, a wonderful man across the pond in the UK named George Stoimenov. George, good morning. Welcome.
Thank you, brother. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So let me tell you about George, a little bit about George. George is the founder and main editor for Men's Corner. You can find that at menscorner.co.uk. We'll have links up on the screen here for those of you who want to go check out what George does there. Now, George is a published writer. He's a men's trainer. He's a podcaster on various subjects of masculinity, men's work, and the journey of being and becoming a better man. So, we're going to talk today about George's latest book, which is called Reclaiming Courage, Awaken the Sleeping Lion Within You, and Live Out Your Purpose as a Man. And George has also authored two previous books that we've done video podcasts on. Now, you can go to the Maximus Heart website. George has links on Men's Corner for these. You can check them out. George's first book was called The Father Wound, Discovering, Addressing, and Overcoming the Hidden Phenomenon That Shapes Every Man's Life. The follow-up to that was The Recovery of Innocence, Uncovering the Hidden Path to Fulfilled Mature Masculinity. Now, you can find all three of these books. They are available on Amazon, UK, US, internationally. Highly recommend that you read all three. You don't even have to read them in order. I just highly recommend you buy, steal, whatever. However you get your hands on these books, read them, and read them slowly. Savor them, enjoy them, because there's a lot of content in there on the masculine journey. So, George, I want to start out riffing for a few minutes about the video clips this podcast opened up with. And I got to say this, there is the dichotomy in both of those clips, and we'll dig a little bit deeper in the Q&A about the subject matter of your book, Reclaiming Courage. But that first clip from the movie Pool Hall Junkies with Christopher Walken. What came up when you watched that clip when he gave that speech to his protege?
The first thing that came up is knowing how true everything is. And also desire. A desire is like, man, we all have a lion inside of us, but why is it that we're so far from him?
Yeah. Yeah, because the lion, like, and only Christopher Walken, I think, could have delivered that speech in that way. The lion is the lion, okay? And even in his own domain, some creatures forget he's the lion, and he has to remind the jackals and the hyenas who he is. And I think as we dive into the Q&A, and I think you hit it on the head in your book, a man has that sleeping lion within him. And sometimes, and I'll say for me, sometimes I forget my lion and he goes to sleep. I forget who he is, and life wakes him up. And sometimes I'm scared shitless about what that lion does, because he does go off and just chews up everything in his path, just to remind the world around me who I am as the lion. But then the lion also has, I think, the right or the privilege as the lion to just relax on the savannah and not be bothered, because he's the lion. And that's okay to sit and be still in that power. And then the second clip from Planet Earth there, about the Robo tribe in Nairobi. And those three men, just got that brief glimpse of Rakita, one of the three men. What came up when you saw that clip of those men standing up against a pride of lions about 12 deep on a kill? What came up for you in your heart there?
Just the sheer courage of it, just the sheer guts. I'm like, wow, man. Yeah. They didn't even slow down. They were just walking confidently. Like, I know exactly who I am. You're not going to intimidate me. It's like, really? Wow. Yeah. But that's what it takes to win in life, doesn't it?
Right. And again, with your subtitle in the book, live out your purpose as a man. Because sometimes as a man, and I've experienced this, I make up the story, you have too. You see that pride of lions on a kill, whatever that means to you or me, but you get up with that air of confidence, that courage, that steadfastness, that face set like a flint, and you go, and you know you're going to be okay. But that's that purpose of the man that the sleeping lion needs to awake. And I kind of like also, I was thinking this morning as I prepped for this, I was even a dichotomy in scripture in 1 Peter, where he describes, the enemy like a roaring lion looking someone to devour. But then yet there's also in scripture the picture of Jesus as the lion of the tribe of Judah. So there's a good lion, a bad lion, in everyone, in every man. So so I want to read just a little bit of some little lines from the book, and this is on your Amazon page for the book. So you start out saying, this is a book for the timid. This is a book for the quiet. This book was written for those of us who are too fearful to speak their mind and fully be themselves before others. Many men, you say, go through life lacking a certain vital force within, a sense of inner strength that, had it been available to them, would have empowered them to live with ease. And the peace that comes when a man is deeply rooted in his purpose, value, and identity. Instead, you say, the vacuum which exists within us is filled with constant anxiety around others and the desire to simply keep things easy, quiet, and simple. And you say, not knowing how damaging this silence actually is. And later on the page, you just say there is a way a man can reclaim his courage and wake up the sleeping lion inside him, and no matter how old he is on the outside, begin living a life of fierce passion, purpose, and the joy that comes with being fully alive. And I love that term about fully alive, because there's a quote by Howard Thurman I love. I have it on my wall in front of me. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people or men who have come alive. And you said, it is time to rouse the sleeping lion. You can do this. Choose this journey. Choose life. All right. So my first question to you around the book today, what timid and quiet part of you compelled you to write this book? Because I know it came out, I know your story. I know it came out of a larger work that you kind of went deeper into to pull out the first two books from, The Father Wound and Recovery of Innocence. But my specific question to start out this morning, George, is what timid and quiet part of you compelled you to write this book?
Most of my inner life is that part. Most of my experience have been being socially, especially around men who appear to be more competent or more in some way, stronger in some way. Part of me would just go underground. That little boy would be scared. However, that was different when I was just by myself, or later when I had children. It's like then I could feel feelings. So I was angry with myself. I couldn't be angry with people, even starting back in childhood at the playground. And I thought I didn't have any anger. I thought I couldn't be strong. But then I was angry at myself. So clearly I had anger. But the timid part is the socially timid part, the part in front of people. Inside of my own self, I'm a tyrant. I've been a tyrant to myself, you know. So that's, to answer your question, the socially timid part.
Okay. All right. Because I relate to that. Because I whenever I say this to people who know me, even casually, they don't understand what I'm saying, because I always tell them I'm really painfully shy inside of myself. And part of what people see on the outside, I believe every man has this, and we've discussed this. Our friend John Eldridge talks about in some of his books, the poser in a man, that beautiful disguise that I give out to the world that they see. I'll describe it for myself. You might have different words for your own, but, you know, confident, bold. I like the word moxie. All of that is true inside, but it comes from that place of shyness, that place of timidity and passivity. And we'll talk more about that because it's deeply rooted in this book, Reclaiming Courage. And I can't, for the life of me, dude, I'll be 61 here in a few months. I've done a lot of men's work, as you have. I still sometimes can't connect the dots between that passivity inside of me, that quiet, timid part, and that lion that is in me, the good lion. But I understand, like you just said, about the anger part, the tyrant that comes out. And when that lion is Walken described in the film clip, just gets up and starts tearing the shit out of everything, just eating everything up in his path. And so, you know, what speak a little bit more about that dichotomy in you, about the angry part versus the quiet part. What does that come online for you really quick? Do you kind of ignore the anger until it just boils up and out, whether at yourself or others? So speak first maybe about that angry part.
Yeah. And first, just to say that my poser, my foes, the first thing that people encounter is the nice guy.
Yep.
Not necessarily for my family or those who really should, I should be nicer to, but the people who are more outside, people who don't know me, and I'm subconsciously hoping, oh, wow, I just want to be a nice guy now. And that's just destructive, because the more you're doing something at the expense of something inside of you, the more that other something would be in the shadow. And this is where things get very wrong. So the angry part is, it's never like that to snap, but it's more like, because inside all my life, I've been frustrated. And if someone is frustrated for like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, if you tap them on the shoulder, eventually, if you keep tapping them, eventually they would snap. That shadow line would come out eventually. Even if it's like, I mean, there is a reason why those mass murderers, those like horrific, there's a reason why they're very weak on the outside as men. They're very few. Yeah, they were not able to be powerful socially. They were not able to dominate in a good way, dominate over their own life, not over others, but over their own. And so then, because they couldn't be masters of their own kingdom on the outside, how they're created to be, then they had to dominate others in a horrible way to make up for that. Absolutely. So yeah, someone said that the tyrant is the shadow king. So if you can't be the king, if you don't have the warrior, and be a king and know and have full mastery over all your faculties, over your gifts, your abilities, your talents, how you interact with others, then where does that go? Where does that desire go to exercise fierce mastery? Like, it goes all the way back from the Garden of Eden, you know? Where does that desire go? It goes underground, and it turns against yourself and eventually against others. And let's face it, even if you don't hurt others with angry outbursts, you hurt them by your absence. That's what people don't realize, that there's so many good men who just sitting back, allowing their wife to do everything, as a result, making her more and more frustrated, more and more angry. And it's not her fault. Let me say, it's not her fault. And then we blame our wives. It's not the wife. It's we who allow that. Christopher Walken in that clip said, even the lioness would try and see if the lion is really a lion. Of course she would. Can you blame her?
No.
Can you blame her?
No.
They need something stronger to push against in order to feel safe. Everyone, even my children, they'll push my boundaries because they want daddy to step in. They can't say it, but it's true. I need to be strong. And there's no one else in my kingdom apart from God who should be stronger than me.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, you bring up, I mean, many good points in that description there. I mean, we talked offline recently. There was the mass shooting here in Louisville a couple of weeks ago, where a very young man in his early 20s, like we described, a boy in a man's body, couldn't handle what he was going on internally. And I don't know the whole story, so I'm not going to make it up for him. But, you know, taking an AR-15 and going down to the bank where he worked and killing 5 people and injuring a number of others, yeah, something went horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. And that was the only way and these are my words, it may not be your words, again, the shadow lion comes out and just rips everything apart. I mean, again, almost everybody in the community here was praying for those who were killed and wounded. Obviously, yes, the mercy, the compassion, but I didn't hear one person pray for the family of the killer. I mean, what is their life now because of his anger, his destructiveness, his inability to, you know, rouse a good sleeping lion in himself, in his masculinity. And that shadow, that evil, that destructive part of him, that force came out, and yet their lives are also torn apart forever. And so, yeah, that's that part of me as a man. Another example I'll just give you really quickly. A couple of weeks ago, I was walking to a bus stop here in Louisville, and I was walking down the sidewalk, and a man came up riding a bicycle on the sidewalk towards me. Now, you know a little bit about my story. I hold my line really well. So I'm just walking down the sidewalk, and he literally pulls right up in front of me. The wheel touched my shoe, and the guy looks at me and says, okay, so you're not going to move? And I said, no. And he said, so you're really going to plant your flag here today? And I said, no, my flag was planted before you even got here. And so it was so funny, dude. So he started to argue and ask me what's wrong. And finally I did. I acquiesced. I stepped aside. Immediately when I stepped aside, like 1 foot, something really small, that little boy in me said, oh, motherfucker, what did you just do? You fucked me again. But the guy kept tapping me like you just described, not physically, but he kept coming after. I let him pass. I said, you win, you go, but he would not let it go. And I threw a phrase at him, and he got off his bike and he came at me, and it was a beautiful feeling, because having read your book recently and knowing what I've done in my own work, as I saw the violent man coming at me, and I was armed, I had a knife in my pocket, I could have taken it out to maybe defend myself, but knowing that this violent man is coming at me, I just stood there and watched it. I just stood and watched his anger. It was so out of proportion to what happened, but I was sitting there as a student watching this go on. I'm thinking to myself, this is the man George wrote the book for. This is the type of man that you're going after in this book, because it was the overreaction that maybe came out of a place of timidity and passivity. Maybe he had to prove a point. Maybe he had to blow up that much in order to give himself some, I don't know, but I was just fascinated at the anger in him. And he was right up in my face, didn't touch me, he didn't put hands on me, but I was just like, okay. I wanted to ask him, what's the anger about? But I knew that would have blown him even more up. But it was just fascinating to understand what you're trying to reach in the book with men. So in the description, you talked about that vacuum where then anxiety and silence come into a man. So let me ask you a two-part question. First, how would you describe this book to a man you want to give this book to?
Please forgive me and feel free to edit this because I'm just, it's about that story, man. I mean, pick your battles, John. I'm just going to ask you and begging you, pick your battles. I don't want you getting into a fight with people and stuff. It worries me a little bit.
Okay. And no, we're not going to edit that out. And we know each other enough, and people can go onto our various websites and look at our past, your podcasts and video podcasts and mine. And so, yeah, I get that. And thank you as a friend to say that, pick my battles wisely, because the battle wasn't over 6 inches of sidewalk space. When I walked away and filtered that down later in the day, here's what came back. I believe, and this is in my heart, God wanted me to confront that man for a reason the man needed.
That's true. Yeah.
And you are totally, absolutely 100% right. What if that guy came and put hands on me? There were 3 men standing right 12 feet away from me.
They would have filmed it.
No, they didn't film it. They were passive, dude. They didn't look. They didn't speak, like Adam in the garden with even the apple. Passive. We're going to talk about this, the passivity. Those 3 men stood there and did nothing. And I thought later on, if that guy put hands on me and I did something or we got in a fight, my balls and my bones say those 3 guys would have done nothing. And so, wrapping around. But you're right. Take my battles wisely. Thank you. And
if this is the case, if you felt spiritually, I have to do this good.
No, I felt that afterwards because I walked away, man. I was like, so I walked away, naturally fearful. I think if any man sees another man coming at him in potential violence, there's a natural fear, fight or flight. So I felt both. I felt like running away in the moment, and I felt like fighting. But you're right. I mean, pick the battles wisely. But, the anxiety then in the wake of it felt very shameful. Felt a little boy like, you fucked me again. You wouldn't stand up for me. You wouldn't fight for me. You let me get shit on. You let me get spit on. Where are you to protect me? And you talk about a lot of that in the recovery instance too, in the father wound. So all of that was wrapped up in that. So let's go back to the 2-part question. How would you describe this book, Reclaiming Courage, to a man you want to give this book to?
If you lack the confidence to be yourself, you need to read this because this will help you see how you can get it back. If you lack, I guess, the courage, the guts to speak out, to do things that you would like to do, to say things that you'd like to say to people, but you can't. Something inside is stopping you. You see how. Yeah. And
I've got that part in me too. It really is. I think it's a part of us as men. Again, from the model of the first man. Again, Adam in the garden. We talked about this. Eldridge talks about it in Wild at Heart. That passivity of him at the moment where he needed to bring his strength to the situation, and he stood there and he said nothing and he did nothing. I'm sure he wanted to say, "Hey, Eve, drop the fucking apple, don't do it." And he wanted to kick, the serpent, tear it apart, squish it, crush it. He wanted to do all that, but he just said nothing, did nothing. And I think that's what you're inviting a man who is, as you described at that point in the book on Amazon, this is a book for the timid. This is a book for the quiet. And George, I believe you're very courageous to write a book like that and lead with that out, because again, that's the parody. That's the caricature of men. That's the go-to. I'm going to be the bully or the brute or the rough guy or the muscular guy, and you've been that, and you've talked about it on your website, in your writings and everything. You've experienced that for yourself. But as you also, with vulnerability, shared earlier, there's that timid part of you, the quiet part of you. I've got it too. And I hate it when that part comes up. I absolutely hate it, but it's got to be embraced.
Exactly.
Mel Gibson, when he was trying to help and mentor Robert Downey Jr. out of his addiction, he used the phrase, and I just love this: you got to hug the cactus long enough to become humble as a man.
Yeah.
Because the cactus, if you think about a cactus, who the fuck would want to hug a cactus?
Mm.
It hurts. But in your books, you're inviting me, you, other men, to do the work that's necessary to address the father wound, to recover the innocence of that little boy. And now, as a man, in reclaiming courage, to wake up the sleeping lion. So the second part of the question I want to ask you is, speak more about that vacuum that you described, and how maybe for you or another man that anxiety and silence comes into the vacuum to fill it. Because again, a vacuum needs to be filled. Think about just a vacuum in your house. It's built for what? To suck up dust and dirt. That container needs to be filled. If you don't plug in a vacuum and use it, the bag is empty. It's useless. So a vacuum by nature needs to be filled. And you're talking about that in men. Most of us, all of us, some of us tend to go towards anxiety and silence. At some point, maybe for days, decades long, where that vacuum is just filled by anxiety or total silence. I'm not going to say or do anything. I'm not going to move the needle. I'm not going to rock the fucking boat. I'm not going to do anything. So speak about that vacuum that you talked about in the book.
Yeah. Well, first to say that it comes out of weakness, that vacuum, because we all have that weak little boy. And we, just to generalize, we typically either overcompensate for that weakness or we're just going the other way. So we're either becoming too much of a protector, so we'll fight over anything just to protect, like you name it.
Like me and the guy on the bike on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Because this is a small battle, but when you feel that your permanent role is to protect, then you're gonna fight over anything. That's why you have people fighting over parking spaces, things like that. And however, someone like me would become the opposite extreme when you just don't fight over anything. Literally anything, and you become so weak because I can't, I'm weak anyway, so I'm just going to be the nice guy. So you either become the extreme warrior, and you have people covered with tattoos, and no judgment, I've got a tattoo, or lifting weights and stuff, which I've been there. No judgment at all, no judgment for each one of us, because we all have it inside of us in different to different degrees. But it's like you ought to have those aggressive guys, bring it on, and they can get themselves to a heart attack place by the time they're 50, because it's constant. It's on. Come on, I take on the world, because you're protecting that. It doesn't come out of this 100% warrior strength. I'll fight a lot when I really need to, but it's more like I really need to because I feel weak. So you better not push me around. And that's comical. That's just too much. It's just waste of energy. Like someone said, so I think it was Gordon Darby, talks about that genuine strength, the wasting fist fights and things like that. It's like, oh my goodness, we're wasting genuine power here. Or people like how I became. It's like peacemaker. Even when I was a bouncer, I was big, I was lifting weights. Even then, people really liked me. They always hired me because I always kept the peace. Some of it is genuine gifting. Some of it is just cowardice, because I couldn't bear to be hated. I couldn't bear to make an enemy. God forbid that someone like me should make an enemy. I wouldn't be able to sleep. It wasn't the physical altercation so much that scared me, even though that's scary enough for everyone. But it's like that someone would hate me, would look at me and say, come on, I'll take you on. It's like, no. And so the vacuum, we have to fill it with something. But if we're hanging there long enough to fill that vacuum with me, before I could act it out as a nice guy or as a bully, whatever, to name that vacuum is the first thing that pops in is self-hatred. Okay. Because that little boy would say, oh, look at this again. There we go. So it's me again. So you're no longer angry about the external situations. It's nothing to do with that. Just whatever they're triggering in you, it's like, look at you, you weakling. Look at you, you're a coward. And so that's the micro reality of the vacuum before we start feeling, okay, well, then I will. So before that, between us and the little boy, there's a vacuum, and we fill it with self-hatred, and then there is the decision to do something about it or not do anything about it. But there's this decision. So before that, to go back on the actual vacuum, for most of us, just self-hatred or lack of belief. Oh, look at you. I'm just weak. I'm just weak. I'm not like that. In my case, I'm not like my dad, because my dad, he actually spoke out. He acted out. And I was wanting to be like this, but because I couldn't, or I believed that I couldn't, then I said, well, I'm going to just be the total opposite. And I remember being around people, friends of mine, especially being a bouncer and all that. I mean, there are many tough guys, and most of them, they don't care if they hurt someone's feelings, which is kind of fine because you want to get the job done. If someone is causing trouble in that nightclub, you need to get them out, even if their feelings are hurt.
Exactly.
That's your job. You're a man.
Yeah.
And then I used to feel like, oh my goodness, that was kind of, I hope they don't think we're like bullies and all that. And I'm like, George, why are you agonizing over stupid things? They deserve to be thrown out, So the vacuum.
Yeah, and you bring up an excellent point about that vacuum coming online very early age. And we've talked about this in various stories and podcasts and video podcasts we've done before, both on Men's Corner and Maximus Heart, about that wounded little boy. And again, you talk about it in those first two books, The Father Wound, and in Recovery of Innocence. And again, for me, that violence of my father early on scared me so much that I used to pray for, when my parents fought, that my life would be made miserable, so somehow God would then transfer something good to them so they would stop fighting. And I've always been, and still to this day, there's parts of me that guy comes online where if I'm funny, if I'm, making people laugh or feel good, or I'm joking, everything's fine. But if I'm not well, if I'm quiet, I call it the black hole. I have this capacity in shadow where if I'm not the nice guy, like you talked about, the good guy, the peacemaker, the joker, the one that makes people laugh, if I'm not that in front of other people, they sense it immediately, and I become this black hole that will suck the energy out of the entire universe around me, because I'm really, the little boy in me is really fucking pissed off. It's like, oh, you're going to like me when I make you laugh, but if I'm feeling blue or sad or alone or lonely or ashamed, you don't want anything to do with me. I'll show you. I'll suck all the energy out of your universe into mine, and I'll swallow it whole like a black hole. And I do that really well. But that's that little boy you talk about through the father wound, through the recovery of innocence, that has to do that work in order to reclaim his courage and awaken the sleeping lion.
Yeah. Amazing, fascinating, because the sucking in of other people's joy and energy is actually the opposite, is the shadow side of the opposite shadow side, the polar opposite of what is your gift, which is, as a courageous man, to live outwardly, to contribute, to give. Even when you look at the man for design, men are doing things, men are useful. Just sitting around being a man, I don't care what people say. It's just there's something is missing if a man is useless. And so even when you take the sexual act, like John Eldridge would say, the man is actually giving out physically. He's putting out. So when you can't do that, then you end up doing the opposite. There is no middle. And just to say, for people who are sitting here and just say, well, I'm not like George, I'm not like John, then I'm probably fine. I'm kind of normal. No, you're not.
Right.
Definitely you're not. You are either doing this or the other. You are either overcompensating, and it doesn't have to be with physical aggression. It doesn't have to be with sports. It could be through work, through intellectual, but you're overcompensating for your weakness with something, or, you're doing the opposite.
Great. And again, that's a very courageous part of putting this work out, because you're not whitewashing it, you're not milk toasting it, you're not sitting on the fence in this book. You're telling a man from a man, you're the man, you are a man, but you're inviting that man to say, no, you can't have it both ways. There's something's got to give. Something's got to give. And so, rage, I wrote this down this morning. Rage is not the lion awakening. It's the lion exploding for the kill, like in that clip from Pool Hall Junkies. You know, that lion gets up, finally had enough. It's going to tear the shit out of everything around it. So, you know, what is, you know, based on what you wrote in the book and what you want to say to a man, what does a man do with that rage in order to wake from the slumber? What do you do with that rage? I mean, you've done a lot of work, as I have, in men's work masculinity, you know, becoming a better man. What does a man do with that rage to wake from the slumber? Sometimes maybe the rage is needed to wake up.
Yeah, it is.
What does he do with that rage? Like, you know, I've said this and I understand this, and it is in my spirit. I understand fully why a man will commit suicide, and I fully understand why a man will commit homicide. I have neither capacity in me. As a man, honestly, I've thought of taking my own life. I think everybody does somewhere along the journey. And as a man, I fully understand this, and I think everybody has had the same thought. I want to kill that motherfucker in front of me right now for X reason, Y reason. But what does a man do with that rage when he wakes up from the slumber?
Yeah, the first thing is to find it, to observe it, not to do anything about it, but to find its roots. And I'd say other people don't deserve, like your wife or your kids, to deal with the consequence of your past. So you need someone like me and yourself. They need to speak to someone like that, but not just to speak, to actually find the roots of that rage. And I, like in my own life, you know, I mean, at the end of the book, I put some examples, and it was like, okay, what are you really angry about? I'm working with someone at the moment who he does not want to, he shies away from being angry in front of people who can help him, like myself, because I seem to be stronger in holding that space for him. But he explodes against his loved ones. He just explodes, and then he wants to be left alone. I said, no, don't be left alone then. Come to me. Come to me then. Because I want you, while you're angry, to say, okay, what is it? Who is it you're angry with? Strike the iron while it's hot. Get it out. Otherwise, those poor people will keep paying.
The pattern will continue.
And then you feel horrible about yourself, because actually this is not who you're designed to be, and you know it.
Right. And again, going back to the story with the guy on the bike, that was the question when he was coming at me from my mature masculine. I saw him coming. I wanted to ask him, why are you so angry? What's the anger about? You've done your work. I mean, I've had decades of work with the Mankind Project in the past. I'm no longer with that path, but those decades of work paid off. And so it's messy work. Men's work, I'll say this to you, I'll say it to whoever watches this. Men's work, if you have the courage, choose the courage to go into it, it's not nice. It's not coming in on a fucking silver platter cart and everything's nice and clean. It's messy. It's messy to do the work. But the mess has to be addressed to get cleaned up.
Yeah. And one thing that we lack as a Western society, we have everything else. We have the intellectual knowledge. We can read all the books, spiritual as well. But like within the church, especially, what's lacking, what we're really afraid of, is the actual lion inside of us. Because we can know about courage, you can read about courage, and even about working through your anger and stuff, but we do not want to go near it. And what happens is, every time when we do, it's by chance, by accident. That's the demonic side. That's where the enemy has us.
Oh, absolutely. And the enemy in my own story, we've talked about this, and I'm an open book. I'm not shy to talk about it. That's why I went to so much sexual sin, so much drug abuse and addiction, so much hatred and inner violence towards my own inner boy. You know, and I'm still doing my work today to make amends to that little boy, because he didn't deserve my violence like my father Michael gave to me as a young boy. And he doesn't deserve that. You address it in the father wound, in Recovering Innocence. You talk about it, write about it, lead a man to those points to say, hey, the father wound has to be addressed. That little boy has to be embraced and integrated. And so, these are paths that you write about in these books that, again, it's going to be disruptive to any man who reads these books. It's going to disrupt the nice, safe little world a man, you, me, any other man builds around ourselves. but there's a reason why those bricks have to come down. There's a reason why that wrecking ball has to go through those old buildings, those old protections, those old castles around us that don't work anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So many men are living in silence because they're actually good men, and they're able to keep the lid on their anger. To the point, like myself before, I didn't even know there was any anger.
Right.
But so if you can never get angry, there's a big problem there. There's a huge problem, because that was me. I could not get angry, and then eventually I found out, oh, I am getting angry, but actually towards myself and the people who I love. So many good men out there are just keeping the lid, and they're actually feeling fine. And that's in many ways depression in some forms. So, but to encourage them, I would say, don't worry, your wife is not going to pay for it. You need men like myself and John. You need someone like that who can handle your darkness, bring your darkness to the table. Let's work through it together. Don't hide it. But, if you don't, your wife and children and grandchildren, they will pay for it. Even if you never raise your voice at them, they will pay for it because you're not present. Now, and let me explain that a little bit. If a huge part of it is depressing things on a daily basis to the point that it's not even conscious anymore, how can you be a good man? A good man is someone who is present and interact. Now, if you're just there, but part of you is not present because you're too busy suppressing something from the past, then you cannot be yourself. So you cannot contribute to the lives of people, because parts of you, they're not bad. You're not bad for suppressing your anger. In many ways, it's better to suppress it than to lash out and be a violent husband, violent father.
Absolutely. Right.
Much better to suppress it, but still not the answer, because you're still not yourself. You're still not the man that those people need, because many people feel that thing like, I can't come forth and be myself, because they never have been taught how to, because those muscles are too busy suppressing things. But then when we do the work and release them, suddenly, the man is free. And now, sometimes you might need to raise your voice. Sometimes you might need to correct someone, discipline someone within your family or something, but it's no longer out of proportion. It's no longer out of your historic baggage. You want to kill everyone. It's not that. It's literally just righteous. It's good. It's life-giving. And, you shall know them by their fruits, right? When I discipline my children, it doesn't result in the damage of my children. If I'm raging at them, that would damage them. But if I discipline them, I'm fully in control of how much power I turn on. I said, no, go to your room. I'm not going to go to your room. You will go to your room now. And then
instead of going over and slapping a kid and dragging him by the arm and throwing him through the door into the room and then hitting them again. Instead of that, you can use that legitimate power that you have, and then there's love, there's peace, and they know it's for their own good, rather than just. Well, that's a healthy model of the mature masculine as the father to the son or the daughter, that they see, this is my father. He has a true strength. He understands. Yes, it's not pleasant in the moment to be disciplined, but he is protecting me. He is teaching me. He is setting the boundary, because I have stepped over something, and that this is not a punishment, but it's a procedure. It's a protocol for me to get right with myself and my father. He's not hurting me. He's actually helping me. And you just talked about depression, and I like that physical thing that you did about pushing down, and you talked about in the book about men when they tend to go to depression from the anxiety in the vacuum and the silence, as it's stated in that oft quote, life of quiet desperation. So is there a part in your story maybe recently, or that you can speak of briefly, that where in your story do you still go to the misery of a life of quiet desperation? I'll model this for you. Sometimes in my singleness and aloneness, there is still, and it's the work that continues, where I go to that sexual temptation of pornography or masturbation because I'm miserable alone. And I think, okay, I've made choices in my life and story. I don't really feel regrets about it. But all of my relationships with women in the past were outside of marriage. They were not pure. But still, as a single man, sometimes in my own misery or my quiet desperation of being alone, either by choice or by force, I fall short. I go to something that's really it's the sin of pleasure. Sin is pleasurable for a reason. The enemy set up sin to be pleasurable, whatever the sin is. Just in that moment, it feels like, that feels good. But really, if you think about the word God, is right in the middle. That's what everyone's seeking, the trueness, the strength, the purity of God, that feeling of he delivers from himself to me everything I need. But me chasing the world, the flesh of the devil, I'm just getting that, but I get miserable enough to go to that false truth, that false joy, that false pleasure. So in your story, is there somewhere that you still go to the misery of a life of quiet desperation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still, in many ways, I didn't want to publish this book yet because I'm thinking I'm not an example yet, but I'm on the journey.
Yes.
And we have to just comment to say here, we're wired for pleasure. The fact that we're looking for pleasure to numb ourselves, that actually, it's not a bad thing in itself, is where we're taking that desire. That's bad. So we're wired for pleasure. And once you awaken the lover in you, and the lover, by the way, doesn't mean, I mean, women are actually a very small part of that lover because not everyone is married or has, but once you wake up to the lover in you, you taste food in a better way. You enjoy the breeze on your face. You enjoy relationship. You enjoy just watching things. You just enjoy taking. So the lover is, I wouldn't say feminine, but more receptive part of you that takes in.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be more righteous than you here. I have been looking at. We know each other here.
We know each other's stories. Yeah, we're not whitewashing this at all. Anybody watching or hearing this? Yeah.
I was doing the same thing since I was like 6 or 7 years old, very early in life, just to the woman in the magazines back in those days. Now I'm happy to report this has not been the case for years, but I still notice that when I felt to tap into that lion and just exercise something, like have a good day, have a good, basically just dominate externally, not over people. Let me say, not dominate over people, but just do the thing that I know I had to do. Just serve my family, serve my purpose. Now, if I've not, I feel that yes, it's no longer sexual. At least I'm not taking it there, but it's food. That literally, that's my biggest right now. External vice is my goodness. Well, I wouldn't say the biggest. It's. I mean, I can just still overeat, and that's the lover again.
Me too.
Stuffing myself and watching things, watching something that would just numb me, and just keep going. And I'm thinking, wow, man. And that is so connected to the lion inside of me, because when I have been able to exercise that good aggression, and I don't mean aggression even in terms of raise your voice, I'm talking about being successful in a meeting at work, helping someone successfully, getting done what I knew that I had to get done. Now, if I've not been successful enough at that, then I seem to still need to numb myself. And I'm thinking, I can just stay here and eat and watch for hours. And it's kind of scary. But the opposite is also true. And I talked about my friend Andrea, that I had to go and do some workout with him because I felt, George, you have to do this. You have to make yourself feel uncomfortable. And most of the times I would fast. I wouldn't eat, which is the opposite, isn't it? Fasting is the masculine. Fasting is the austere, like rejection of the comfort in order pursuit of strength. Yes. And of course, there's place for both. Let me say this, there's place for both. But when I've not been able to be strong, then I make up for that with just being receptive, taking in pleasure, and or being irritable at home, being not a good husband to my wife, being irritable, being cranky, as you would say in the States. You guys would say cranky. It's like, even my daughter is using that. I'm a bit cranky today. So that's not good. That's a replacement. That's making up for something legitimate. Now, if you fight your battles outside of the home, it means that inside is a place of rest, place of peace.
Right, a sanctuary.
A sanctuary, and you're a source of quiet strength for your family. Right. But notice who is the bully. Notice who is the man who comes in like the typical archetype with the white sweatshirt, and that the guy who's been crushed by his boss, the guy who's been unhappy, who hates his job.
You take it off on the family. Yeah.
You take it all out. But whatever you're taking out is legitimate. It's legitimate strength. So you need to fight your battles outside, challenge yourself outside. And I'm speaking to myself here. In order not to have it fight against yourself and against your loved ones and against your own body. When you overeat, when you think, I'm a good guy, I'm not beating anyone up, I'm overeating, you're doing violence to your body. So how is that good?
No, and George, thank you for your vulnerability and your transparency and your honesty always, because that's my story too recently about the overeating and the numbness with whatever, Netflix, Hulu, whatever. But it's fascinating because if you think about that clip from Planet Earth with the pride of lions on the kill of the wildebeest, those lions are devouring that, like stuffing themselves because maybe they haven't had a kill in weeks. So they are going to stuff, eat, tear every piece of meat from those bones, and then they're going to go off to sleep, to rest, because they're sated, they're full. And in my story recently, and you know this, we're not going to dive into this because I think eventually we're going to do a Men's Corner podcast about roots in writing somewhere down the road. But right now I'm actively pursuing the lover in my writing projects. And I found it so fascinating where I will self-sabotage myself a lot recently is where I'll come home with the intention of connecting with that lover, connecting with my strength, my creative strength, but yet I choose somehow to overeat stuff and then go to sleep. And it's fascinating. And then, the cycle of shame and guilt. Oh, you can't do this. You won't do this. See, you have good intentions. But it's fascinating because, again, as a student and a son of God, I can step outside of myself and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm doing that. I can see why I'm doing it too. And I feel so much better when I don't choose to do that stuffing as the lion on the kill of the wildebeest and sit down, whether it's in the morning or evening after work, and just be with the lover, be with the creator, be with the creation, the co-creation of what we're doing on these writing projects. There's a time for the food. There's a time to, I love watching film and story, you know this, but there's time in its place for each in its own way. But yet that part of me, like you just described, will stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff. And I go to bed bloated and just like, what the fuck? And wake up with, acid reflux. And it's like, this is the payoff. And I didn't type one line today. Okay, let me try again. And that's the graciousness for me in my story of God. It's like, yeah, come on, let's come back. Let's do this again. You don't have to do that, but let's do this. And so, as we turn a corner here this morning on this, heading towards the finish, let's describe some simple first steps for a man to rouse that sleeping lion, the good lion, within himself.
Step number 1, remove your go-to place. So, for example, I would, back before we had children, when I was living with my wife, I would, whenever I felt that, we're arguing, I want to be understood, and I would try and explain myself to her in order to feel better. And she would very frustratingly would say, you don't need to do this. This has nothing to do with me. Go in the bedroom. And I'm like, no, it's all to do with you. If you only listen, we'll get it right. But what I wasn't saying is, like, if you only listen, I'll be able to make myself feel good at your expense, because I'm not a man enough to face what's in me. So I need to just explain to you, and hopefully you understand me. You better understand me, right? No pressure. And then we feel good. Whew, I was understood. It's like, and she said, no, I'm not doing that. And she was number one catalyst in my, ironically, to wean me off the mother, because mommy, I want the comfort of mommy. If the woman understands me, and one wound for me has been going for that pleasure to women before I met my wife, just surrounding myself with the bliss of the feminine presence and love, so that I don't have to feel my pain of not being a man, not having that lion. And this is the pain. But when I wean myself off and say, okay, well then what? Then where am I taking this? Then what's this? I don't feel angry, but I know it's there. So what is it about? So remove what your pleasure is. Remove what your point of comfort is. Could be food. It could be being understood by your wife or partner. It could be watching pornography, right? Remove this, remove the comfort.
Yep.
There is a reason why it's called a sin. Sin is like missing the mark. It's like, it's not this moralistic, oh, you better not do that. It's not about that. It's about what that wrong thing is stopping you from becoming. You see? It's not about that thing. It's not about being a moral man. It's about,
right? It's
an obstacle. Exactly. It's an obstacle towards your true self. Stay with the pain. Stay with the pain. And I remember one time just feeling, just feeling this hatred. And then suddenly I was able to, because there was no outlet, I'm feeling frustrated. Suddenly I was able to just think, wow, not just at myself I'm angry at, but actually at particular people in my past.
Yep.
Suddenly you were wrong about me. You're wrong about me. It's like, wow, okay, who's that then? Come on, bring it on. You know, punch them in the face, right? Go express. I don't mean really in the.
No,
I have to say these things sometimes because of the way I speak. I just mean that you're stuck with the shadows of some people in your life who suppressed you, they bullied you, or they misunderstood you. You need to push them out physically, and I do that sometimes. Physical work with myself to get at least in the past, but also with other men. I'm like, just do me a favor. I hold the boxing pads and say, hit it for me. And they've never had any history of violence. I wouldn't be able to. It doesn't matter how you punch, just punch it.
I just hit it.
Boom. And it's like, wow, look at this quiet man. How much strength, how much power he's got. Now you got a lot behind that punch, a lot of emotional charge. Do it again. Suddenly he's awake. Suddenly I'm in the presence of God. I'm in the presence of greatness that he put in the man, not to be a bully, not to be a silent guy who goes along with everything and then does violence to himself. No, to be himself, to be awake. And then you'll be using your strength for good. And then the lioness, the hyenas would respect you. They won't be pushing you around anymore, not because you're scary, you hurt them, but because you're just there. You're there. Right. When the lion is there, like, they know, they don't need to, and they are free to be themselves. And I include that little poem in that book, which is not mine, but that's exactly about that. Because the lion found his roar in that poem and he finally became himself, then it says all the jungle animals were happy. They had a party and everyone was happy. When things come to place, when things come together, when there's a flow, everyone is happy, including people that you think they don't want you to be yourself. That's not true. That's not true. When I'm myself, even when I discipline my children, they love me because I do it from a place of journey and strength, and then they know why. So yeah, it doesn't feel pleasant for them maybe to be myself at the moment, but actually in the long run, they need me to be myself. Otherwise, they're jeopardized in so many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And in the wake, and these 3 books have come out rather rapidly, I believe, within the last year. So even in the wake of that and the recent publication of Reclaiming Courage, how has your heart felt, not only as a writer, but as a man? How has that felt to take this journey that you've experienced yourself, put it into words and on paper with your gift as a writer? And how have you seen, if you're looking in that rearview mirror right now, how would you describe how that feels for you to have done this with the father wound, with Reclaiming Innocence or Reclaiming Courage and Recovery of Innocence? How would that feel to you?
It feels good, especially the first 2 books, to just get them out of the way, because everyone needs to address these areas before they get to the 3rd one, even though they don't have to. But very interesting what's happening to me when I was during the writing of that 3rd book, which is the only real book that I wrote. And I'm saying that because the previous ones I've just edited. I had them for years. They're just chapters of a bigger book. But this one, I discarded all materials and I just wrote it from top to bottom myself in real time. And that felt very interesting. The opposite of what I thought, because when you write about courage, you want to feel courageous. What was happening to me is like, I felt that I should just drop any external sources of strength and courage that are not bad, and I literally became weaker than I've ever been. And I feel that, and I'm saying with all the honor and the weight behind that, I wanted to be like an instrument of God, really, because I don't want to be another macho man writer. I don't want to be another guy who goes and lift weights and punch the punching bags and you say, you need to be stronger. Even though there's a legitimate place for the physical, because men are given stronger body for a reason. Use it or lose it. But I felt that I wanted to get to the bottom of that weak little boy inside of me. I wanted to fully feel my weakness, almost like I was given no choice, because I even had a very long bout with, I had a cold, a flu, chest infection, which forced me to go to bed early, forced me to do more reading and writing, forced me to just, in the winter, in the January times, to spend time indoors, forced me to fully open up myself to my weakness and rely on what's beyond the weakness. I never knew it, because very often as men, unless we're forced to spend time in that solitary, almost like in the hospital bed, we would never go beyond. We would never find our legitimate strength, which is actually a spiritual strength, because the battles we're facing that we need to be strong for, they are spiritual battles. And even if there's war against two nations, one nation is not bad. It's just they might be serving something evil that you need to fight. And, doesn't mean not dealing with them physically, but it means it's not about that at all. It's beyond that. Principalities, powers, whatever, not to get too spiritual. But to answer your question, I've never been weaker externally. When I was writing a book about being strong, I've never been weaker. And even now, finally.
Isn't that an interesting dichotomy, though? Yeah. I mean, it really is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, finally I'm beginning to emerge of maybe I should start doing some exercising. Maybe I will start living more externally again. But I have never been weaker, and I've had some wonderful experiences with the inner boy being strengthened. In fact, thank you so much. I was going to say, you sent me and a bunch of men recently an email, a talk by Morgan Snyder on the Become Good Soil podcast, parts work, part 4. My goodness, I was listening to this in the car and in that moment of weakness, and I just was, I was praying, and I said, okay, I was agreeing with everything. And I felt something was happening inside of me, because he was telling my story, weakness and things like that. And it's like, yeah, wow. But I was completely so empowered in the place of weakness. So you need to be willing to be completely weak in order to be strong. So yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, that at one time, Morgan said to me, he said, Johnny, why are you wasting your pain? I was like, internally, and it came out extra. I was like, fuck you, buddy. I mean, really, but it's true. Okay, so that pain we talked about earlier, that pain is valuable. There's no way, or, the old cliche, no pain, no gain, especially like the weightlifting or whatever physicality work men do. In getting a better body, just press that down into the spiritual life. There is, no pain, no gain. Okay, there is pain in the work. There's pain there. And, that's part of my journey as a man, my spiritual and masculine journey. Days into decades now, I've learned how to lessen the impact of the pain, but I'm not wasting it too. I'm learning how to use that in good, positive, healthy, mature ways. And so, that parts work that Morgan Snyder was talking about on Become Good Soil, that I believe is at a foundation of what you've been writing about as well. These are all parts: the father womb, the recovering of innocence, and reclaiming courage. So, my hope and prayer for you, my friend and brother, is that however that looks like in the story of your masculine and spiritual journey, keep writing, keep sharing, keep being courageous enough to take these parts of you and your own story and put them into words, into books, into however you need to get that message out to me and yourself and other men who are in desperation to get it. If I continue to look around at men, and I'm like, man, there is quiet desperation, there is violence, there is rage, there is self-hatred and self-loathing and shame. I see the posers in me. All I have to do to see a poser is look in the mirror on any given day, and I see parts of him in me.
Yeah.
And yet,
and
God and the Spirit keep coming after those parts of me, and I have to open the door. I have to hear the knock. I have to invite him in, and I have to have the courage to do the shovel work with him always, because it's not like he hands me the shovel and says, Johnny, I'll sit here because I'm God, you do the work, I'm just going to kick back and have some bourbon here and watch you. No, he's right there with me with the shovel always. Like, let's do this together, son. Let's do this together. And so, just menscorner.co.uk. That's your website, Men's Corner. I highly invite men who are watching this, hearing this, however they find it, to go to your website, to get into your archives, your podcasts, your writings, your mission, your purpose there. And please go to Amazon. All of George's books, Father Wound, Recovery Innocence, and Reclaiming Courage are there. Please get them however you can, and read them. And I'm just excited for you, brother. I mean, it's been amazing in my story how God has cobbled our stories together over the last few years to see what you're doing, what you've done, what you continue to do. Huge inspiration to me in my own journeys, spiritual and masculine. So bless you and thank you for doing that work for me on my behalf and inviting me into the work with you.
Thanks, bro. Thank you so much for holding this space and organizing and making it all happen. It's a treat for me. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And again, this will be available on the Maximus Heart .com website once I get it put together. I'm sure George will link it from his side as well. George has a YouTube channel for Men's Corner as well, so you'll be able to find the product soon enough. And once again, who knows where we'll get together again on either side of the pond. And we just love talking about the journey. And so thank you all for listening or watching, however you got it today. George, thank you again, my friend.
Thanks, brother. It's been a pleasure.